Let's learn together a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa, Perek Lamed Daled, pasuk Aleph. It's the first source in your source sheet. The context of the story is familiar to all. Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain with the two luchas, the two tablets, engraved in them the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 sayings, the 10 commandments. He observes, to his horror and dismay, the creation of the Egel Hazav, of the golden calf. He lifts up both of the luchas and he throws them down and smashes them into little pieces. He destroys the golden calf. He admonishes the people. Earlier already, before he came down, he's been beseeching God for forgiveness, and he succeeds. He goes back up again and continues his prayers. And finally, after long conversations and debates here and back, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Hashem tells Moshe, Psalach hashnei luchas avonim karishayim. Carve out, chisel out for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. I will transcribe on the new tablets the same words that were on the first tablets which you have broken. Be prepared in the morning, come up in the morning to Mount Sinai with these 2 tablets that I will engrave, and then you'll bring them back down. Nobody should come up on the mountain with you. Nobody should appear in the entire mountain, the vicinity of the mountain. Even the sheep and the cattle should not graze el mul haharahu, parallel to the mountain. So nobody should come up onto the mountain. Nobody should appear in the midst of the mountain, the environment of the mountain, and no animal should graze, pasture, el mul, in the presence of the mountain, parallel to the mountain. This pasuk, these psukim are well familiar. Moshe does that. He brings back the 2 luchas, Hashem engraves them, and he brings down the 2nd tablets down to the Jewish people. A few weeks ago in Parshas Yisro, the first time this happened, the first time Hashem was giving the Torah to the Jewish people, when the first luchas were being prepared, the first time Moshe went up to the mountain in order to receive the first luchas, in order to experience Matan Torah and then receive the first luchas, Hashem also warns against anybody coming in contact with this mountain. Yisro Perek Yutes, be prepared for the 3rd day. On the 3rd day, Hashem will come down before your eyes, before everybody's eyes on Mount Sinai. You should limit the nation around the mountain, telling them, be careful, don't come up to the mountain. And to touch even the edge of the mountain, any part of it, even its most extreme distant point. Anybody who touches the mountain shall die. Now, most people read this pasuk, you read the pasuk in Kisisa. Seems very similar. In both cases, the mountain is sacred, the mountain is holy. In the first case, the mountain is made for you, Moshe. In the second case, the mountain is made for you, Moshe. The first is before the first Matan Torah. The second is the second, so to speak. Not Matan Torah, but the second luch is being given. And people must stay away from the mountain. It's a dangerous zone. Later, the mountain will become permissible for everybody to come on. Till today, there are people who go with their camels on Mount Sinai, on what many believe is Har Sinai. because once the experience finished, the mountain is free for all to ascend. But if we gaze, if we delve a little deeper, there is a very interesting difference, and this difference is highlighted by the commentary of the Tzofnas Paneach, written by the Rogatchover Gaon, Rabbeinu Yosef Rosen, in his commentary on Tzofnas Paneach in Yisroi, in one line, quote, third source, Hine kan in Yisroi loy nokat el mul hahar, v'sham loy siga loy ksiv. In Yisroi it doesn't say el mul hahar. In Kisisa there's no mention of touching the mountain. He points out, the first time around in Yisroi, the emphasis is on touching the mountain. Twice it says, Yishamru lechem alois bahar unoigeya bekatzeh, to touch it, even at the edge. Kol hanoigeya bahar moisyumas. The second time you might think Hashem would say the same thing. Tell everybody not to come up on the mountain and not even to touch the mountain. The word touching doesn't play a role the second time. What he says the second time is, Hatzoin v'habakar al yiru el mul haharahu. Parallel to the mountain. Al yeira b'chol ahar. Don't come up to the mountain. Don't appear among the whole mountain. And don't graze el mul, parallel to the mountain. Never not to touch the mountain. Why the distinction? Why the difference? At first glance, it seems like a minor detail, a nuanced detail. How much significance can there already be contained in this? But not in the world of the Rogatchover Gaon. In Torah, sometimes the smallest details and nuances reflect fundamental ideas and notions and truths, as we will see here in this example. From his perspective, this difference between the prohibition of touching the mountain the first time around and the second time around reflects a major fundamental difference between the two experiences. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's move on, and we'll come back Be'ezer Hashem. There's a big question that most of the commentators raise, all the way from the earliest generations, from the Rishonim. Already in the Medrash you have it. And the question is a very simple one. Why did Moshe have to break the luchos? It seems completely inappropriate, and even if we could say wrong behavior. Haluchas ma'aseh lekim eimav hamichtav michtav elekimu. It's the most precious item in the world. In fact, it's priceless. The luchos habris were carved, created by heaven itself, by Hashem himself. Moshe comes down, whatever the reason that motivated him to break the luchos. There's many different reasons given. He felt the Jews are undeserving of the Torah. Yisrael kula mumrim, they don't deserve the Torah. They're serving idols. Another reason, he wanted to protect the Jewish people so that he tears up, he destroys, so to speak, the marital contract, the ksuva. And other reasons, why break it? Don't give it to them. Hide them, hold them, give them back to their creator. Take something that Hashem himself made. He never told you to break it. The Gemara says it's one of the three things, Gemara in Shabbos, Pei Zayin, one of the three things that Moshe did on his own. V'yiskima HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem agreed. Why break the luchos? Some even ask, how do you even have a justification to break the luchos? Some even argue when they ask the question, it's a lav. Lo yisasum kein l'Hashem alekechem. You're not allowed to destroy one brick of the Beis HaMikdash. You're not allowed to be moichik. You're not allowed to erase a letter in Hashem's name. Here he takes the very luchos habris that Hashem made with Hashem's name, with the Aseres HaDibros, with the Torah, the holiest item in the world, doesn't only destroy one part of it. The whole thing he breaks. And there's probably dozens and dozens and dozens of different explanations on this, all the way from the Rishonim, all the way down to the Acharonim. But it's a big question. Some say Moshe, the Ramban says, "Etzich kent einhalten." He doesn't say it in Yiddish. He couldn't deal with it. In fact, it's interesting, the Ramban says the same thing in Shmos. He saw the Egyptian beating the Jew. Why did he kill the Egyptian? Rationally, you have to think about it. For killing the Egyptian, he basically was almost executed. He had to run away to Midian. Yeah, Moshe could have thought about it a little more rationally. A little patience. Try to figure out a strategy, how to save the Jew. Even if not, as somebody once suggested, Moshe could have thought to himself, I am the prince in the palace. I'm a talented young man. Paroi one day will kick the bucket. May it be Bekarev. Hopefully I could take over the throne, and you know what? I could liberate the people. Long-term strategy. Here, you kill the Egyptian, what happens? Now you have to become a refugee. Now you have to run for your life. You just forfeited your chance to rule the country and save millions of Jews. I mean, hundreds of thousands of Jews, or millions of Jews. Why? The Ramban says, you're right. He saw a Jew being beaten. He couldn't contain himself. You're right. All the questions are right. He couldn't contain himself. The Ramban says the same thing here. You're right. He couldn't. He broke it. Such aggravation, such despair. Just one perspective. There's many, many other perspectives. But today we're going to address another one. So that's another issue we want to address. Let's see source number 4, a very famous Mechilta. Mechilta is one of the great Midrashim written by the Tanoim, Rabbi Shmuel, during the end of the second Beis HaMikdash era, after on Chumash. Mechilta on Sefer Shmois. The pasuk says in Yisroi v'chala amroyim es hakoiles v'salapidim. The Jews are standing by the mountain. This is the first time they're experiencing the giving of the Torah, and later they were supposed to get the first luchas that would capture that experience 40 days later, but they were smashed. They see the sounds and they see the lightning. Of course, we all know the problem. You can't see sounds, you could see lightning. Zok the Medrash Rabbi Akiva says, Royin es hanishma v'shoymen es hanira. They saw what is usually heard, they heard what is usually seen. Usually we hear sounds, we see lightning, they saw sounds and they heard lightning. Rabbi Shmuel says, let's not push it. Royin hanira v'shoymen hanishma. You have to read the pasuk in an ordinary fashion. I mean, you have to read the pasuk the way it's ordinarily understood and interpreted by people. They saw what is seen and they heard what is heard. So when it says v'chalam royim es hakailes v'salapidim, it means v'chalam royim es halapidim. They saw the lightning, the voices. Actually, obviously, they heard. Rabbi Shmuel's perspective, we understand. We see what we could see. We hear what we can hear. Nobody sees sounds, and it's hard to see images, to see paintings. I mean, it's hard to hear paintings. You can hear a lecture about them, but synesthesia is not an ordinary experience. What does Rabbi Akiva mean? Royin es hanishma v'shoymen es hanira. So you say, we don't know, it's a miracle. What did Rabbi Akiva mean when he said this? And he argues with Rabbi Shmuel. Why? Next, Medrash Rabbah Shmois Parsha Memvav. Shmois Parshas Kisisa, the Medrash Rabbah says as follows. Moshe hischil itztayed al shibur haluchas. Moshe felt bad what he did. He felt bad that he broke the luchas. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu al titztayed beluchas harishonos. Don't be upset that you lost the first luchas. Shaloi hoyu ela aseres hadibros bilvat. The first luchas contained only 10 sayings. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha through lo yisachmoid. Ubeluchas hashneim. The second luchas. Ani noisen lecha that I'm going to give you. Yehebem halachas medrash v'agodas. The second luchas, ay. They're going to come with a package. All the halachas, all the medrashim, all the agodas. In other words, we're talking about the whole Mishnah, Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi, all the medrashas, explanations on the psukim like Mechilta, Sifra, Sifri, all the agodas, all the homiletical interpretations and stories and so forth. Hadahu diksiv, this is what it says in Iyeh, Vayagid lechat halumas chachma ki kiflayim l'toshiyah. The new luchas, don't be upset. The first luchas, you did a good thing. You gave away the first luchas, you're getting much, much more. And this is a very strange medrash. Besides the question of course, as the Gemara often says, lo yechote nisker. Just because you didn't behave, you get more. It's not fair, right? You didn't go to school, therefore you go to the trip. Because you stayed home, that's why you go get the outing. The whole breaking of the luchas was a tragedy. It came because of a terrible catastrophe, a moral catastrophe. And says, don't worry, you're getting much more. And if not, they would have been missing this. But really the question goes even further and becomes stronger. Let's imagine there were no second luchas, there were the first luchas. What would Judaism look like? Aseres hadibris, that's pretty good. That's it, you don't kill, you don't steal, you don't do, Aseres hadibris are pretty tough, some of them. What about, there would be no 630 mitzvahs? So if there would be 630 mitzvahs, you wouldn't need halachas? From the Aseres HaDibros you could understand how to keep Shabbos. We spoke in our series on Emunah. There's not one mitzvah you can understand without Torah Shabbat Peh. It says, Zachar es yoyim ha-Shabbos l'katshe. Remember Shabbos and make it holy. Lo yisasachol malacha ato vincho v'techa. What does it mean, lo yisasachol malacha, not to do work? Does it mean not to lift a finger? Does it mean maybe not to walk to shul? Does it mean not to leave your home? Does it mean not to schlep a couch from one place to another place? How am I supposed to know? It means 39 types of labor, lamites avos malachas. I'm allowed to schlep a couch, but I'm not allowed to switch on a light. I'm not allowed to cook something. You need halacha. There's no Aseres HaDibros without halacha. The same is true with every one of the mitzvahs. The mitzvah of Shabbos, the mitzvah of respecting a father and a mother. What's the definition of respect? When are you exempt of respect? Lo sirtzach, lo signav, lo sinnav, lo sachmad. Everyone has nuances and details, circumstances, understand the law. So you had to have the halachas, even for Aseres HaDibros. Besides, does it really mean that without the second luchas there would be no 630 mitzvahs? During the first 40 days on the mountain, Chazal say he was teaching him Torah and mitzvahs. And yet the Medrash Rabbi says, don't worry, the second luchas, now you get all the halachas, you get all the medrashas. So the halachas, medrashas, and agadah are just an explanation of the Aseres HaDibros and an explanation of the Torah. Only by the second luchas. What is the meaning of this? The Maharal has a commentary called Gurari, the Maharal of Prague. In Yisro, Perek Chav Pasuk Aleph, he quotes the words, Vayedaber Elokim es kol hadvarim ha'ele lemer. Hashem spoke all of these words saying. So Rashi says, Melamed she'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol Aseres HaDibros b'dibur echad. Hashem spoke all of these words. Now that pasuk is superfluous. It could have said, Vayedaber Elokim Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. Hashem spoke. What do you mean? Hashem said all of these words. Obviously, whatever he said, he said. What's the necessary? Why is it necessary to have an introduction? Hashem said all of these words. You think he didn't say all of these words? He said part, somebody else said it. It says Hashem said, say what he said. Says Rashi, Chazal teach us that Hashem said kol hadvarim ha'ela. In one utterance, in one dibur, he said all of the words, all of the Aseres HaDibros. Says the Maharal, even though they understood nothing of this dibur, because the only way we can understand the message is if you share with me letter after letter, word after word, sentence after sentence, and then I could make sense of it. If you're giving me a divine speech, taking 10 different statements and compressing them into one dibur, I can't understand you, I'm sorry. Amram b'dibur echad. He said them b'dibur echad. Why? For what? For when? For whom? What's the point? Like we say l'chadoidi, right? Zachar v'shamar b'dibur echad. Shamar, we say shamar v'zachar b'dibur echad. Hishmiyanu keila meyuchad. Hashem echad or shma echad. So he can do it. But what do I benefit from it? I can't hear zachar and shamar together. If I am hearing it, it overwhelms me. So when it says zachar the first time around, shamar the second time around, in Parshas Yisro it says zachar. Parshas Veschana, when the Aseres HaDibros are repeated, it says Shomer. Chazal say, what really happened? Did Hashem say Zachar es Yom HaShabbos or Shomer es Yom HaShabbos? So they say he said them both simultaneous. Asks the Maharal, what's the point? Nobody can get it. He asks it also in Yisro. He says all the Aseres HaDibros together. Loimar, to teach you, ki kol ha-Torah inyan echad v'dibur echad. To teach us that the whole Torah is one inyan, one theme, and really one word, one dibur. That's why he said, Kol hadvarim ha'ele lemer. I quoted all these sources. I asked all these questions because I feel this is all an intro to be able to understand the perspective that the Tzafnas Panech, the Ragachover Gon, is going to give us here. Let's learn another Mishnah. What does the Maharal mean? What is he saying? Let's learn another Mishnah, Pirkei Avos Perek Hey. We all know this Mishnah, Ba'asara ma'amaris nivra ha'olam. The world was created through 10 utterances. What does this mean? If you read Parshas Bereshis, it says 10 times Hashem said, let there be, and there was. Vayomer Elokim yehi or, let there be light, there was light. Vayomer Elokim yehi ma'oris, tachay aretz desha, nasa adam. 10 statements, 10 sayings that the Rebbeinu Shalom uttered, and the world came into being. The Gemara says there's only 9 times Vayomer in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, and the Gemara answers, Bereshis nami maimerhu. Bereshis is also considered an utterance. In the beginning, Hashem created. Uma Talmud loymar. Why does the pasuk say this? V'aloi b'maimer echad yachal libaros. He could have created the whole world through one utterance. Abracadabra, kadu. I believe I once read that abracadabra is actually from Hebrew. Evra ka'adabera. I will create as I speak. Abracadabra, evra ka'adabera. So that's why people say it in that context. I'll create something, some magical trick. But Maimer Echad, one saying, he could have created the world. That's what the Mishnah says. Ella, what's the answer? To exact payment from the Rishayim, who destroy the world that was created through 10 utterances. And to give reward to the righteous, to tzaddikim, who preserve the world that was created through 10 utterances. In other words, what's the meaning of the Mishnah? If Hashem would have created the world with one utterance, so he only spent one word on it. So if you destroy it, big deal. You didn't destroy something precious. But once he creates the world with 10 utterances, now you're destroying not a world that was created through one. A world through 10, jetzt darfst du chappen patch. Asks the Medrash Shmuel, he says, Yilmadeinu Rabbeinu, this is unjust. This is unjust. He says, I have a question. Let's say you went and you bought a watch in a store. Between you and me, the watch is worth $8.99. For whatever reason, you liked it, or the person did a job on you, and you paid for it $900. I take the watch, I destroy it by mistake. I destroy it, I drop it, it breaks. Do I have to pay you $8.99 or do I have to pay you $900? What do you say? So the halach is you pay $8.99. You pay for the value of the watch. With this $8.99, he could buy a watch like this. He decided to pay $900. Okay. But it's not the value of the watch. The Medrash Shmuel says, 1 second. Is the world worth a maimer echad or asara mamaras? What is it worth? If you could create it with one maimer, the fact that you chose to create it with 10 mamaras is this my problem. I don't have to suffer by destroying a bottle of water that cost $1 just because you decided to pay $10,000 for it. It's your problem, not my problem. That's what the Medrash Shmuel asks on this parak, on this Mishnah. Besides, of course, the very Mishnah is strange. The reason he created the world with 10 utterance, not with one, is you would think first he would start with the positive, to give reward to tzaddikim who preserve such a beautiful world. No, he starts with the negative, lihipara min harishayim, to exact payment from the Rasha who destroys a world that was created by Sarah Mamaris. There are two ways in which Torah could be learnt, studied, perceived, understood, and experienced. Two very different ways. In the language of the Rakachava Gan that we will soon see inside, one is as a klal that consists of many pratim, and one is as many pratim that may make up a klal. In other words, one is as a, if you could put your cell phones on vibrate, please. Mit Yidden darf man beten a paar Mal. One is, if you could put, one is, you see it as a klal, as a collective whole, a wholesome, unified, integrated entity, which expresses itself in many different details and nuances. Or you see it as essentially a conglomerate, a collection of many different details, and the whole is, even if you master the whole, it's basically a sum of its parts. You're making challah. We all know you have flour, you mix the flour with water and you knead it, and the flour, kemach, becomes an isa, a dough. Only then does it become obligated in challah. Flour very small particles, but every particle is self-contained. Yes, you may combine them together in a bowl, in a pan, in a pot, but every particle has its own dimension, it's its own independent reality. Now you need it, what we call lisha in halacha, in Lashon Kodesh. You need it, you mix it with water and you knead it, and what happens? It becomes one entity. It's called a dough. So you took from the kemach, you took from the particles of flour, and you turned it into one entity, into a dough. A person could use, so to speak, their telescope and zoom in and see the one star. And the one star is wondrous, it's stupendous, it's unique. Or you could zoom out and you see the Milky Way. You still see the star, but the star is not anymore an independent reality. You see it as part of a larger pattern. In learning Torah throughout history, there are two methods. One I would call zooming in, and one is zooming out. Zooming in is you delve into the detail, and you try to extract everything you can from that detail. You zoom in, focusing on it, highlighting it, exploring it, dissecting it. I mean, in that itself, there have been so many different styles and methods. What's today known as the Litva, the Priske derech, and the Polish derech, and the various paths, dissecting the detail. Then there's zooming out. When you zoom out, it's still there, but now you see it as part of a collective, grand picture. And this is not just a question of how to do it, it's a question of how somebody sees it. There's a person who sees Torah in one way, there's a person who sees Torah in a different way. Let's take an example of a painting. Those of you who appreciate art, understand art. Anybody? You go to museums, you go to art galleries, you do? Yeah. Okay, you don't get headaches? Because some Jews go to art galleries just to say that they went to an art gallery. They hate every moment of it. And they hope that they could be expelled because of an emergency. But they go, so they went, right? So you go because of your wife. Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what they all do. You go to London, they're going to museums. Er steht in a museum, weniger wie a Joven in a sukkah. But he's going to a museum. She taught you, okay? Maybe one day I'll also appreciate it. I'm just joking. Gegesundheit. You see a beautiful painting, a beautiful piece of art, right? So what are we seeing? What are we seeing? Somebody says, oh, you see that line? You see that color? You see that face? You see that tree? You see the cloud? You see the sun? That's true, yes, that's all there. But what is it really? It's not one detail or another detail. The artist experienced a certain picture, a certain vision, and he or she has the talent to impart that on paper, to impart that on canvas. What you're seeing is a whole picture. Now, of course, that picture manifests itself in many a stroke brush, in the shades and the colors and the lines and the strokes and the people and the characters and the mood that it creates. But there's a mood. There's a mood that it creates. There's an impression. There's a roshim that it leaves in your soul, a certain experience that you get that doesn't come from one detail or another detail. It's from the general picture that is then manifested in details. Come now back to Matan Torah. V'chola am royim es hakoilos. Says Rabbi Akiva, royin es hanishma, v'shoymin es hanira. They saw what is usually heard, they heard what is usually seen. What does he mean? One of the differences between seeing and hearing, fascinating difference. When I see something, what do I see? I see the whole immediately. I see the full picture immediately. Only then do I dissect. In hearing is the exact opposite. When I come, you ever went to visit the Grand Canyon, right? You come and you approach it, you take a look. What do you see? You see the grand, literally the Grand Canyon, the grand picture. The same is true with a painting. The same is true with a mansion. The same is true with a person, whatever you're looking at. What do I see? I see your whole picture. I see the whole thing immediately. I see the klal, I see the collective. Now I could stand for hours, for days, for weeks, for years, and maybe for decades, and start taking it apart, detail by detail. You come into the most beautiful home, what do you see? You see the home. Wow, wow. What did you see? You saw everything. Now you could stand, if you have a chush, and start discussing the angles, what the architect was thinking, how he did this detail, wow, how he put it here, how he put it there, and this is what Jews do in Muncie. And then you try to copy it and it takes 10 years, and you're still not happy. Not only in Muncie. So what do you see? You always see the whole picture. Then you get to the prat. What about in hearing? What about hearing a story? You say, I want to share with you a story, Rabbi Jacobson. I could only hear one detail at a time. And I'm listening to one detail, and then another detail, and then the details accumulate, and then when you finish all of the details, now I get the full picture. So let's put it in simple words. In seeing, you start with the klal, and then you go to the prat. In hearing, you start with the prat, and you go min ha-prat el ha-klal. Like we have in the Shlosh Esrei Midas, the different ways, methodologies of interpreting Torah. There's klal u-prat, and there's prat u-klal. And then there's klal, prat u-klal. They're starting with the klal, with the general, the collective, and then from there, I see how it expresses itself in the details, in the various nuanced strokes. And then there's the other way, in hearing. I go min ha-prat, from the details, and ala klal. Then I can build up and accumulate until I actually reach the klal. In learning Torah, there's two ways of learning Torah. There's two ways of experiencing Torah. One is the regular way of learning. In a regular yeshiva, a regular school, a regular ched, a regular koil, a regular beis medrash, ordinary Jew, person who has an education, who sits and learns whatever their level is. How do you learn? Whatever you're learning, you're learning. I'm learning now Masechta Gittin, I'm learning Masechta Gittin. I'm learning Parshas Kisisa, I'm learning Kisisa. I'm learning Hilchas Tefillin, or Hilchas Boirer, or Hilchas Ribis, or Hilchas Muktzah, or Hilchas Kriyas Shema, or Hilchas Dayanim, or Hilchas Tayin Vinitim, whatever it is, Hilchas Gneva, that's what I'm learning. And there's enough to learn. You take Mishnayos Erevin, 10 complicated, complex program, you're learning about Erevin. How to build an Erev, how to be machshir a mavui, about a koira, about a lechia, be'erev chatzeris, Erev tchumen, etc. Every Masechta has its themes, its axioms. You have to know what the Torah says, what's the mitzvah, what are you allowed to do, what are you not allowed to do, what did the rabbis say, how are they interpreting it, and then you get into the Chumash, you get to the Mishnah, you get to the Gemara, you get to the commentaries on Gemara, you get to Halacha, and you're focusing on the detail of every mitzvah. And our generation has been blessed with people who have zoomed in more and more and more. Today, we have authors who write books on every single individual mitzvah. Shiluach HaKan. It's a few psukim. There's halachas about it. But today, it's not just Shiluach HaKan. You go to the bookstore, and you have 10 different books that people wrote about Shiluach HaKan. They zoom in. They dissect every possible situation, all the circumstances. Pidyon haben, tzitzis ka'alacha. Every week, there's new every one. They take something and they zoom in and they try to extract every possible detail, question, dilemma, application, circumstances, whatever they may be. But what are we doing? We're teaching the prat. And that's how we teach. That's how we teach. In many ways, that's the practical way. Hopefully, you'll learn and learn and learn and learn and chazer. And remember, you'll get one detail, another detail, another detail. And finally, you'll be able to accumulate a bigger picture. You'll get more and more. But the definition of learning is the prat. And I think it's fair to say, from what I know, that probably 98% of shiurim are focused on the prat, on the detail. Question is, what style prat? In prat itself, there could be so many different styles. There's pilpul, there's charifus, there's pkiyas, there's lumdus, there's different drachim and paths of how to dissect, but it's focused on the prat, learning the prat. There's another way of learning, and that is to look at the prat and to actually, a little hard to describe, to actually not focus so much on the details and the nuances, even though you never ignore them because they're critically important, but rather to be able to trace back the details of the picture, the stroke brushes, to more general, fundamental, basic principles of thought. In terminology of philosophy and Kabbalah, it's the difference between halbasha and hafshata. Halbasha means to dress up. Hafshata means what? To undress. What does it mean to undress? When I'm learning a halacha, I can dress it up, explain it more, give more examples, give more illustrations, make it more practical. Or I can actually undress it. I undress the particular levush, the particular garment of this halacha, and I try to trace back this law, this discussion, to more general principles that deal with klal, whether they may be in philosophy, in legalities, in spirituality, in sociology, in psychology, in all of the chachmas, in all forms of wisdom, to the general principles of Torah. And here what happens is, suddenly I could find that the same idea, the same principle exists in another 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000, hundreds of thousands of situations. Because I didn't zoom in, I zoomed out, and I suddenly saw a bigger picture. And once I see a bigger picture, and all the details are part of that bigger picture, so now even halachas that deal with other areas, I could find similarities because I was doing hafshata. I traced it back to its skeletons. I traced it back to its fundamental origin, fundamental essence. So first of all, the halacha is much more than the halacha. It's not just a detailed halacha. It's a grand picture that's being expressed in this halacha, and plus I immediately connected to many, many, many halachas. To summarize it and put it in a simple sentence, it's this. Either I am megala the prat from the klal, or I am megala the klal from the prat. Either I have a sugya and I right away look to zoom in and find the details, or I see the details and I try to zoom out and find the klal. Probably the Rogat Shavargon, his Torah, is one of the greatest examples in Jewish history of the latter. His pkiyas, his mastery of Kol HaTorah Kula was unparalleled. He passed away, Tainus Esther, 1936. He was born in 1858. He passed away in 1936, a few years before the war. He mastered the whole Torah, but not just like we say somebody knows Bavli or Shalmi. He knew the Torah like you know Ashrei, and he knew every detail of it. The Sameach once said, don't say he has a good memory, he doesn't have a good memory, he doesn't remember, it's open in front of him constantly. But that's one aspect of it. There's people who have photographic memories, they remember everything. When he discusses any aspect, he looks for the klal. He tries to zoom out and trace it back to the fundamental issues that Chazal are addressing, and suddenly he'll show you 100, 200 other places in Torah that the same issue is being addressed, and you would never connect it to. You know, they say a story, you know the old story about 6 blind men who encountered a big, big body, which we know, I'll tell you the secret, it was an elephant. But they were blind, and they encountered an elephant, and they got into a major debate of what it is. The first blind person bumped into the stomach of the elephant. I don't know if you ever had an opportunity to bump into the stomach of an elephant, but he did, and he says, oh wow, there seems to be a wall right here. There's a wall. The other one felt the elephant's colossal leg. He felt the leg, and he said, there must be a tree here. There's a tree. The third one felt its tail, and he says there's some thick rope, a rope that we can use here. The other one felt the elephant's trunk. So he said, I feel a tree branch. The next blind person touches the elephant's tusks. So he says that he has found some piping. Finally, they're fighting and debating, and they go to a Untitled and a court. Everyone says, I'm right. And finally, a person who sees arrives. And he looks at them and he says, you're all right. Every single one is right. You touched something that felt like a wall, and a trunk of a tree, stem of a trunk of a tree, and a tree branch. All right. And you're also all wrong. What we see here is an elephant. Rabbi Akiva says, lahavdil, by Matan Torah, royin es hanishma v'shoymen es hanira. What is usually heard, they saw. What does this mean? When we hear Torah, we hear detail by detail, prat by prat, halacha by halacha, mishnah by mishnah. But they saw what is usually heard. They didn't only see this aspect, that aspect. They saw, I don't want to use the words, but what they say, well, it's the expression, the elephant in the room. They saw the full picture. They saw the grand design. They saw the artwork, the cloud. On the other hand, v'shoymen es hanira. They heard what is usually seen. They could translate the abstract ideals into nuances, into halachas. They saw that unique synchronization between the big picture and the small picture. Sometimes people could see all the trees, but they never see the forest. They never put the trees in context. They're right. They have it all right, but they also have it all wrong. They got it right, but they also have it all wrong. Not because they're wrong. They're right, but they're right from their perspective. It's a narrower perspective. And then you see the forest. You still see the tree. And you can analyze the tree. But you see that the tree is so much more than just a tree. The branch is more than a branch. You have here a whole elephant. Rabbi Akiva says, lahavdil, by Matan Torah was royin es hanishma, v'shoymen es hanira. The pasuk says, zois ha-Torah adam. Chazal say that the human organism is compared to Torah, and Torah is compared to the human organism. Ramach shasa, keneged ramach evarim, shasa gidim. You see it in medicine. There are doctors, there are medical experts who focus on particular organs and limbs. You have a boo-boo in your hand, you have pain in your hand, that's what they zoom in. That's one medical perspective. And then there's another medical approach, which we call today holistic medicine. I look at the body as one singular klal, one singular organism. Now everybody understands that both elements are really necessary. There's no such a thing a doctor comes and says. Anybody who goes to medical school for a few years before they study that which they want to develop a particular skill for and go into, they first have to study general medicine. Why? Because there's no way a cardiologist can treat a heart and he says, I don't know what's happening with the brain. It's ridiculous. You cannot deal with any single part of the body if you don't at least have a basic understanding of the entire body, because the limbs are not just details. They're not just trees. They're part of an organism. They're part of a central nervous system in the brain. So any doctor needs to have somewhat of a full picture even to treat the detail. We understand. Somebody says, no, there's only a hand. There's no such a thing. Zois ha-Torah adam. Zois ha-Torah adam means Torah is like limbs of a body. So sometimes I only know about a finger, right? About the liver, about the kidneys, about the lungs. Sometimes only about a pinky. I think I have it. Really, I don't get much of it because I don't see the body. But in medicine itself, there's two approaches. One that focuses more on the details, one that focuses more on the klal. The Zohar says, "Istakel b'reisa bara alma." Hashem looked into Torah and created the world based on Torah. The Medrash Rabbi says in Bereshis, Torah was the blueprint that the architect used to create the world. These two approaches in Torah, therefore, are reflected in two ways of seeing the world. And that's the meaning of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ba'asara ma'amaris nivra ha'olam. Va'aloi b'maimer echad yachal hibaris. He could have created the world with one utterance. What does this mean? What this means is, when we look at the world today, what do we see? Everything is self-contained. You are you, and I am I. Even somebody who has an appreciation of the fact that the world has a source, the world has a creator, But ba'asara mamaris nivra ha'olam. With 10 utterances the world was created. And therefore, everything has its place, its dimension, its identity. So when I look at a flower, I'm stunning a flower, and you could spend a lifetime stunning a flower. And when you look at a bee, you could study a bee, and there's people who spend lifetimes studying bees, or ants, or butterflies, or fish, or humans, or animals, or any other aspect of nature. But what do you see? You see the details. And this comes from the fact that creation happened that way. Ba'asara ma'amaris nivra ha'olam. Hashem said, let there be light. Hashem said, let there be produce. Hashem said, Yehi Moiris, let there be the galaxies in heaven. Let there be man, let there be fish, let there be mammals. And within each one of them, there are subcategories and sub-subcategories and sub-subcategories. And therefore, I am I, and you are you, and everything has its ego and it's self-contained. Why? Because the world was created by one God, through different forms of energy. Everything has its identity, its energy, or as we say today, its own atomic, molecular structure. But Maimer Echad Yachal Libaris is not just a hypothetical question. He could have created it by Maimer Echad. There's a way of looking at the world from a perspective of Maimer Echad. Hashem could have created the world by Maimer Echad, meaning with one utterance, that the whole world, you would be able to see the cohesive unity in the whole world. Because really, we know, the more you go deeper into the world, what do we discover? We discover that really, everything is connected. Everything is united. We used to think that every single object is its own reality. Every single person is his own reality. Today we know everything is made up of atoms. All atoms have a similar structure. What distinguishes between one entity and another entity is not a real fundamental difference. It's basically the number of atoms, and it's basically the types that come together, but essentially, fundamentally, you have material that connects the whole world as one. Especially when you deal with the whole issue of, when you get into the whole issue of DNA, one realizes that essentially we're one and the differences come from slight variations. So essentially, the more you go deeper into the world, you find the achdus, the unity. And if you trace it back more and more and more to its source, what do you find? It's one. Hashem didn't create the world that way. That would have been Maimer Echad. One utterance means he would have created the world in a way that wherever you look, you see the reflection of Hashem. You see the reflection of oneness. You see the underlying unity in all matter, because it's one utterance that gives rise to everything. So even though there is diversity, but in the diversity you see one cloud. You see different brush strokes coming from one vision, from one picture. It's not what we see today. Asks the Mishnah, why? On this he answers, if there would have been Maimer Echad, there would be no way for the Rasha to destroy the world and no way for the Tzaddik to build the world, because we would see not a world separate, we would see a world that's completely one. Because of the Asara Ma'amaris, what we see is a separate world. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, what happened by Matan Torah? Royin es hanishma, shoymin es hanir. Now I come to the Rogatchover Gaon's insight. And as his style, he sees it where? In a Tosefta in Sanhedrin Perek Zayin. Go to your source sheet. Tosefta, Sanhedrin Perek Zayin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your 8th source. Zoktim, this is a Tosefta, a Braisa, a commentary on an addition to the Mishnah, Sanhedrin Perek Zayin. Very few people learn Tosefta. If you get through the Mishnah and the Gemara, you're pretty good off. If you get through Bavli and Yerushalmi, you're pretty Tosefta. But by the Rogatchover, Tosefta was like Ashrei. So he says, take a look. A fascinating halacha. It's Erev Pesach. The rabbi is busy selling the chametz, and everyone is calling, how do I kasher my counter? How do I make my kitchen kosher lePesach? Can I sell this? Can I do that? I'm leaving Teretz Yisrael. What do I do? Do I do b'dikas chametz? Don't do b'dikas chametz? And suddenly somebody comes in to the rabbi, and he says, I have to the Rav, and he says, I have a big question. And the question is, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, if I bought an animal with a partner, and we make it a carbon shlomim, and then we do tmura, we take the animal and we decide we want to keep it, and we substitute the holiness of this animal onto another animal. Is it tmura or not? It's a big question in Gemara. What does the rabbi say to him? Halachically, what does the rabbi say to him? This is not relevant right now. This is a good question. But for this we need a Beis HaMikdash. For this you have to buy an animal and make it a carbon. This is called shoyel shaloi ke'inyan. What does it mean shaloi ke'inyan? It's not part of the discussion today. And halachically, if a paisa gets two questions, he has to deal with that which is contemporary, that which is necessary at this moment. This is what this Bryce is discussing. Hashoyel shaloi ke'inyan, somebody is sitting with the rabbi, with the Rosh Hashiva, with the Rebbe. We're talking about the Tanoim, with one of the Chacham. And he asks something out of the topic, out of the inyan, and it could be out of the topic that he's discussing, or out of the topic because it's timely. Tzarich sheyoymar shaloi ke'inyan shalti. He should say, introduce it, say, I'm asking something shaloi ke'inyan. Introduce it. That way, if he doesn't get answered, there's no insult, there's no denigration, he introduces it that way. Divrei Reb Meir. The Chachamim say you don't have to. You know why? Listen to these words. Shekol haTorah inyan echad. There's no such a thing. You ask something that's not part of the topic. So what that means, he's talking about b'dikas chametz, how you buy the chametz. Do you have to bend down on all four and go with a candle under the couch, even though it might burn down the house? You know, the regular shiurim pre-Pesach. And a person comes in and he says, I want to ask a question about a carbon chatos. I dedicated, I did a sin, I desecrated Shabbos by mistake, Chalila, and I brought a carbon chatos. The person brought it, and then the person dies. What do you do with the animal? It's called chatos shemeisu bala. It's a big discussion in Mishnayos. So Chachamim say it's not shaloi ke'inyan. It's not shaloi ke'inyan. We're talking about b'dikas chametz. We're talking about kasher encounters. We're talking about if you're allowed to eat quinoa on Pesach. What do you mean it's shaloi ke'inyan? Shekol haTorah inyan echad. The whole Torah is one topic. It's one theme. What do you mean it's one theme? The meaning here is what? If you take the b'dikas chametz and you trace it back to its fundamental principles, you will find ideas, notions, perspectives, hashkafas that are fundamental ideas that express themselves everywhere, and they will express themselves also in the laws of Tmura and in the laws of a carbon chatos shemeisu ba'ala. Where do we see this? Says the Ragachava, take a look at Masechta Chagiga Davav. Titanya Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yishmael says, Klolis nemru b'sinai protas boil moyet. The general principles of Torah were given on Sinai. The details in the Mishkan. In other words, on Har Sinai, Moshe only heard the principles of Torah. All the details of every halacha, that he only heard in the Mishkan. Once the Mishkan was erected, which was, of course, almost a year after Matan Torah. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Klolos upratos nemru b'Sinai. In Sinai, both the klolim were given and the pratim. V'nishnu ba'ayil mayed. They were repeated in the Mishkan. V'nishlushu ba'arvis mayav, and a third time after 40 years in Arvis mayav. What's the argument? What's the argument? I have to say here, one of the great commentators on the Rakachaver was a Yid, Reb Shlomo Kasher, Zechrona Levracha. So he explains this in one way, although I think that Rakachaver meant the opposite. He says what the Rakachaver means is that Rabbi Akiva follows the klal. In other words, on Har Sinai, klolos upratos nemru b'Har Sinai. On Har Sinai, you both had the klal and the prat because they saw it as one. It's not two separate worlds. Rabbi Yishmael says no, it's two separate worlds. Although the way I was reading the Ragachava, he's so concise and cryptic, he says it in 3 words. I felt that Rakachava, the way I understood it, Rav Kasha was a big gun and the big expert on the Tzafnas Paneach. But if somebody wants to look into the sources, you'll tell me what you think. I think that Rakachava meant the opposite. That for Rabbi Akiva, the klal and the prat are not always the same. In other words, there's pratim without the klal. The pratim are not only expression of the klal, and therefore in Har Sinai you had to get both. According to Rabbi Shmuel, the definition of the prat is only an expression of the klal, and therefore in Har Sinai you didn't need more. Rabbi Kasha's interpretation is geschmacker in the sense that it fits in with Royim and Sanishma, V'Shayim and Hanira. Rabbi Shmuel says you see what is seen and you heard what is heard. Rabbi Akiva says they heard what is seen and they saw what is heard. But here you have another machlokes. Comes Rakat Shava and says another machlokes. Masechta Erevin Daf Samach Tasam Aleph. Zog the Gemara. Reb Meir, if we hold like Reb Meir, the Amar who says Chashad l'davar echad, Chashad l'chal ha'Torah kula, afilu be'echad mikol yisurin shebeTorah nami. If you hold like Reb Meir, who holds, when a Jew is suspected to violate one aspect of Torah, he's Chashad l'chal ha'Torah kula. Fascinating halach. V'ikra banan amri Chashad l'davar echad, lo yav Chashad l'chal ha'Torah kula. The rabbis say it's not true. Here's a big question. If somebody is a mumar ledavar echad l'tayavain, there's one aveira that he has a weakness to. This is a viltzechem. We're not talking here, I don't think, lahachis, an avtzalachisnik, because then he just wants to spite, so then he's a mumar l'chol ha'Torah kula. L'tayavain. He has a weakness in a particular issue. Let's say he likes wearing wool and linen. I don't know why, but I'm chapping on an Eidel Yetzahara. Probably not too many people have that here. A shot in his Yetzahara. No, it's a big question. Mumar oichel nevelis l'tayavin and Yeridei Simon Beis. Somebody who eats treif, he loves food. He loves food. He sees a McDonald's, he can't hold himself back. He sees a Burger King, he can't hold himself back. He goes to the airport, he watches everybody eating hot dogs. He goes on vacation in the places where Chabad doesn't exist, like the moon or Mars, wherever he goes. And there's no kosher food, and he's hungry. No, nobody sees. Yeah, he puts in his false teeth. His false teeth, so to make sure that his teeth don't go to Gehenna. And he eats what he has to eat. But it's not lahachis. He doesn't hate anybody. He's not upset at his mother. He's not upset at his teacher. He's just l'tayavin. He's a hungry Jew. There's such a concept. You may have not heard of it. There's a concept called a hungry Jew. Not a bad guy. He's just hungry. Can you trust him with the rest of Torah or not? It's a question. Reb Meir says, Chashad l'davar echad, Chashad l'chol ha'Torah kol. Chachamim say it's not true. The halacha taka, we say it's not. Besides Avodah Zarah and Shabbos. Avodah Zarah and Shabbos, Chilul Shabbos, is like Ovid Kechava. It's like Avodah Zarah. Says the Rekachava, what's the argument? What's the argument? It's a practical question. A person has a shvachkeit for treif. Reb Meir says, no, there's no such a thing. Torah is one entity. Torah is one entity. The moment he's a chashel l'davar echad, so that means there's no Torah for him. He's chashel l'chol Torah kula because it's one entity. For example, let's take a mother and a child, a father and a child. You tell your child, all year you're my child. For the next month, I'm going on vacation. You're not my child anymore. Don't call me. Don't email me. I don't know you. The rest of the time, you're my child. Everybody understands there's something off. If you're my child, and I experience you, my child, it's 24/7. Marriage is maybe a more practical and sad example. Right? Some people think when they go to work, they're not married. The wife calls 1 o'clock. What's going on? What are you doing? Yeah, a couple ones came to me. What was the issue? She called him every day, 1 o'clock. What are you doing? And he would always say the same thing. I'm laying on my hammock and drinking pina colada. That's what I'm doing. He felt that it was disrespectful that she said, what are you doing? Because men think when you ask them what you're doing, it means you're lazy, you're doing nothing. They don't understand it means I want to connect to you. Okay, but that's a separate discussion. So a person thinks he's going to work now, he's not married. So somebody says, I'm married all year. But when I go on a business trip, now I'm not married. Every Sunday, I'm not married. You're never married. You're a business partner. You live in the same house. You're not married. Marriage, by definition, the way Torah sees it, is 24/7. It's plaguf. It's part of who you are. I'll say, today, I'm not me. It would be a wonderful thing not to be me one day. Trust me, everybody tries doing that. That's why they drink. They do different things. People don't like to be themselves. But you can't not be yourself. Marriage is part of who a person is. That's the commitment of marriage. Unless chas v'shalom, they cut it off. It's plaguf, as the Zohar says in Vayikra. It's like two halves of a body. So Reb Meir says that's Torah. Zohar Torah Adam. Yeah, you can't say we're going to cut out the heart and you'll still function. Why? In each aspect of Torah, there's no one aspect. It's a klal. The moment is a chashad l'davar echad, is a chashad l'chol Torah kula, because the whole Torah is one entity. So the moment he affected that, he blemished that, he's disconnected from the whole Torah. The Chachamim say that's a very lofty state. There are details. There's details. A person has a weakness for this mitzvah, a person has a weakness for this mitzvah, and therefore you can't judge them based on everything. So you have the most beautiful painting in the world. You cut off part of the painting. You cut off a little part of it. Let's say you have these paintings of Raphael, of Rembrandt. Yeah, the painting is worth $35 million, $45 million. I come and I cut off a little piece at the edge. Yeah, at the edge. So I say, okay, it went down $50,000. I mean, what is it? No. So shenish de Rembrandt. So shenish Rembrandt. It's already your own painting. You go to Mona Lisa, you put on glasses. Put on glasses. No, it's not that. What? Why? It's like a symphony. There's a symphony. Yeah, they say a story that Mozart once did a symphony, and the Emperor of Austria was Emperor Joseph II, and he came to the symphony. And he did what people do. He was a little tone deaf. So what do you do if you go to your wife schleps you to a symphony, and you're tone deaf? What do you do? Megait schlafen. They say in Chabad, they tell a story that the Rashab, the fifth Rebbe Rashab, had a chassid. He was a very, very, very chassidish yid, a ehrlich yid, a real Oved Hashem. And his wife, this is Russian intelligentsia. Russia, theater was a very, very big thing. And she felt very cultured and Russian and literate and educated. And she would go to the theater with her friends. But she always wanted, you have to go to theater with your husband. You don't go to theater yourself. She would always nudge him to come with her to the theater, to the theater. And he said, no, it's not for me. It's not for me. It's not for me. And this was a very, very contentious point in their marriage. She felt it to be important for him to come with her to the theater. So what does a chassid do? So the next time he went to the city of Lubavitch, he went into the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Shalom Ber, and he says, this is the mice. His wife wants to go to the theater, and of course he's not going to go. What should he do? She's very upset. So to his shock, the Rebbe says, geh in theater mit her. Go to the theater with her. He was shocked. He goes to the theater with her, and it starts. So what does he do? He falls asleep. First he takes out a sefer, he reads, then they shut off the lights. So he falls asleep, and he used to snore. So he starts snoring, and his wife is, by a theater, every person who's cultured or thinks they're cultured or wants to be cultured sitzt. And you sit in it. In Russia, it was like a whole big thing. It's not like in Broadway here. Stam Fashkatzim over there was like a whole cultured maisa. You came dressed. It wasn't Stam, you came, in jeans and before the Chet Tzadas. Over there, it was a whole thing. So Sapasnish, so she's elbowing him. So he wakes up, he takes a look. There's nothing for him. He falls asleep again. Anyway, they come out, she says, Hast mir gemacht a solche bushes, ich nehm de keinmal nicht in theater. You made me such bushes, you embarrassed me so much. I'm never taking you back to the theater. How do we get into this story? I don't even remember. You remember? Huh? So somebody cuts off a piece of a Rembrandt. They say, okay, $50,000. It's not the same thing anymore. Why? Because okay, very good. So Emperor Joseph too, he falls asleep. Like people do. What do you do at a rabbi's drasha? What do Jews do? You fall asleep, so he falls asleep. Mozart was the genius of music, so he finishes. So he goes by the king, the emperor. The emperor says, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, thank you very, very much. Job well done. But too many notes. Too many notes. Mozart says, Your Majesty, which one do you suppose I cut? There was not a note too many. A real composer knows there's not a note too many. Every note is indispensable to the energy, to the message, to the story that the ballad creates. Reb Meir says, in that sense, lahavdil, Torah is a symphony. Torah is a painting. So you cut off a little bit and you say it's not that anymore. You're missing that. On the other hand, most people, when they look at it, that's a very deep experience of Torah. That's, according to the Rakashava, the argument between the Meir and the Chachamim. If mumar l'davar echad is mumar l'chol ha-Torah kula. You know what the fascinating thing is? You read Gemara, Shas. Whenever the Gemara wants to bring proof to something, what's the expression? When the Gemara wants to bring proof to something. Ta, shma. Come and hear. You learn Zohar. The Zohar wants to explain and bring proof to something. What are the words? Ta chazi. Come and see. Why? In many ways, not completely, but in many ways, this is the difference between Nigla and Nister. Nigla means revealed, Nister means concealed. It's not only concealed because no one talks about it. Even if you talk about it, it's still concealed. Why? Nigla is Tashma. Nister is Tachazi. Tashma means come and hear. I'll share with you the details, and that's how it has to be. Here's one detail, another detail. You have to delve into the details of the halacha. What Nister is trying to show is the concealed, not because you don't talk about it. Even when you talk about it, it's concealed. You're trying to show the underlying essence, the full picture, the inner divine energy. Now, even in Nigla itself, there's Tashma and Tachazi. It's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. But generally, that's the focus of these two elements of Torah. There's a fascinating insight from the Vilna Gaon. And this is the Vilna Gaon. I say it again, the Vilna Gaon, who writes in his commentary to Mishlei that a Jew who doesn't know Kabbalah, who's not a master in the whole Torah HaKabbalah, cannot paskin a din in Nigla and Halacha to give a real trusted psak. Now that's very strange. A Jew knows Shas. He knows Erech Chaim Yerdev and has a Choshen Mishpat with every Shach Taz, every Magen Avram and every Semeh. He can't paskin. Now he doesn't mean, of course he doesn't mean a psak that says, you know where to look it up. He means a psak where you really have to be original. You know, anybody, if it's a question that says in Shulchan Aruch, I can open up. Even if it's a question that's very similar to what it says, you know, you can make an application. But he means to really have the authority of somebody who can paskin what Torah says in a new situation. You have to know Kabbalah also. Why? Why? The answer is, you have to know the one. You have to be able to see the full picture and all of the layers of it, of course, as much as possible to the human being. I mean, even a human paisik is still not the full picture. We're talking about infinity, we're talking about God's wisdom. But his point was, there's something missing in the halacha if you don't know the Kabbalah, if you don't know the Nister. Because you see a finger, another finger, and you get it right. But you don't have the elephant in the room, or I should say here, you don't have the full symphony, you don't have the full ballad. Comes the Rogatchover Gaon and he says this was the difference between the first luchas and the second luchas. This was the whole difference between the two sets of tablets. The first luchas vayidaber elakim es kol hadvarim ha'ela. What's kol hadvarim ha'ela? Kol hadvarim ha'ela means those words are superfluous. They're not superfluous, they are the story. Hashem spoke all those words. In other words, all the dvarim ha'ela were kol. You could see all the words in kol, in a klal. Vaydaber elakim es kol hadvarim ha'ela. All of the words were b'dibur echad. So the Maharal says, why? They didn't understand it. To teach you kol haTorah, the words of the Maharal were inyan echad v'dibur echad. Maybe when you're thinking with your ears, you can't understand it always methodically. But that was the experience. That's how they experienced Torah. Royan es hanishma. They saw kol hadvarim meila. He spoke all of these words. They were in kol. They saw the klal. They saw the full picture that's then manifested in details. All the dvarim were in the pchina of kol. It says in Parshas Kisisa, Hashem gives Moshe kechaloisai l'daber itay. The Yerushalmi says kechaloisai miloshen klal. Kechaloisai. It was all a collective. Why was this? Because at that stage of Matan Torah, we experienced the unity of everything. First of all, the unity in the Jewish people. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ha'or. It doesn't say vayachanu. So Rashi says from Chazal, they were always fighting. Now it was keish echad b'leiv echad. When it says they were always fighting, it doesn't mean necessarily petty. It means by definition, people are different. They argue. People have to argue. Ein they say in Shabbos, the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin. People's opinions are different. That moment, what they saw was the underlying soul in which I may be I and you may be you, but really we are expressions of one light, of one source, expressing itself in different ways. That's by people. In Torah, Vaydaber Elokim es kol hadvarim meila. So therefore in Torah also, they saw the Maimer Echad in the world. They saw in Torah also not Aseres HaDibris. It was Dibur Echad. The Aseres HaDibris were one Dibur, one source. They saw Torah in its quintessential source, and therefore everything in Torah was ultimately one. Because the more you trace it back to its source, it becomes one. And in learning what that means is that in everything you trace it back deeper and deeper and deeper to its source. The more you go to the source, the more you will unite things. It's true in science, it's true in physics, it's true in every single experience today. The deeper we go, the more spiritual, the less brute, and the more unifying. The more unifying. And the same is true in the world. The Gemara says in Zvachim that during Matan Torah, Tzipor loiga, Shar loitzavach, the animals, everybody was silenced. The whole world, from all four sides of the world, the Gemara says they heard Anochi Hashem Elokecha. In other words, the unity was experienced. Where do you see that this was the experience of the first luchas? Here, if just for this, you have to give the Rogat Shavar a kiss. He finds Kedarkai. He says, by the luchas, the first luchas, the whole Torah was one Metzias. Kemevur b'Yerushalmi shkolim and saita. So now you look, where in Yerushalmi shkolim and saita does it say the luchas were first one Metzias? So the commentators point out to the Yerushalmi he means. Let me show you a Yerushalmi. Now be honest how you would learn this on your own, okay? Let me give you the context. The Pasuk says in Shir Hashirim in Perik Hey, Pasuk Yudalit, Yod, the Kala, the beloved, the bride is talking about her groom. Yodav Galilei Zahav. Right? His hands are wrapped with gold. Mimuloyim b'tarshish. They're filled with Tarshish, which is considered a precious stone. That's literal. His hands are surrounded by gold, filled with Tarshish. In Aramaic, Tarshish means an ocean, Yama. The Targum says Tarshish, Yama, an ocean. Comes the Yerushalmi. Look at your next source, Masechta Shkol and Perik Dalet. The same Yerushalmi you have in Masechta Soita. Perik Ches, Halacha Gimel. And the truth is, it's also in Medrash Rabbi and Shir Hashirim on the Pasuk. Says the Yerushalmi. What does it mean, Mimuloyim b'Tarshish? His hands are filled with Tarshish. So the Chazal interpret these psukim to refer to Matan Torah and the Luchas. So he speaks about Galilei Zav, the gold, but that's not for now. Then he says, Muloyim b'Tarshish. Tarshish is an ocean. Chananya ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua Omer. Chananya, the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, says, Bein kol dibur v'dibur, between each one of the 10 dibris, each one of the 10 commandments on the luchas, dikdukea v'ois yoseha. You had all of the diyukim, all of the details, and all of the letters of the whole Torah. That's what it means. Mimuloyim b'tarshish kiyama rabba. It was filled, the luchas, our sentences were filled with all, between each dibur, all the dikdukim, all the oisius, like a big ocean. That's what the nephew Rabbi Yeshua said. Okay. Reb Shimon ben Lakish kad have mati lahadin karya. Reb Shimon ben Lakish would reach this pasuk, Mimalayim b'Tarshish, Haya Omer, he would say, Yafel limdeini Chananya ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua. Chananya, the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, taught me something really nice. What? Ma hayam hazeh, just like this ocean, this sea. Ben kol, ben gal, gadol, galim ktanim. Between one large wave and another large wave, there are small waves. Kach ben kol davar v'davar diktukev ois shal Torah. So this is the meaning of Mimalayim b'Tarshish. The Aseres HaDibros are like big waves. Between one big wave and another big wave, you have small waves. What are the small waves? Diktukev ois shal Torah. The little diyukim and details and nuances of the whole Torah. That's the pasuk Mimulayim b'Tarshish. It's filled like a Tarshish, like a yam. What does it mean? It's filled like a yam. You have big waves and you have small waves. What is he saying? Why was Reb Shimon ben Lakish so impressed? He says, this is beautiful. Was happens on ocean? A lot of things are filled, right? You could say the beach is filled with sand. You could say the jungle, you could say the forest is filled with trees. Between one tree and another tree, what do you have? You have earth, right? Wherever you look, usually there's something between things. It's Kiyama Rabbah. Between it, you have small waves, and Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, Yafalim Deini. He taught me something nice. So in truth, if you were learning this, how much time would you spend on this? People read these Gemaras all the time. Between one wave and another wave is another wave, and that's the diktukim of Torah. Okay, what's Yafalim Deini? Says on this Yerushalmi, the Rakachava basis, his whole idea. What's really fascinating about this is that today we can understand it more than anything else, more than ever, perhaps. Because in this past generation, there's come up a big question about the nature of light. If light is particles or waves. On one hand, physicists experimented with light and it behaves like particles. Particles, as I began to share, every particle, like every marble, every ball, you can have many marbles, many balls, but each one is a particle. And they experimented with light and it behaved like particles. When particles hit resistance, right? When particles hit resistance, they behave a certain way. They did other experiments and they saw that light behaves like a wave, which is basically an integrated, unified reality that's not divisible. And these experiments were both correct, and they did it again and again and again for years. And therefore today, most modern physicists, perhaps all of them, but I can't say all, but most, have come to the conclusion that light, or if you want to speak in more general terms, you have electromagnetic radiation. So that means microwaves, radio waves, light rays, X-rays, gamma rays have a dual nature. Light behaves both like a wave and a particle. The same has been proven about the behavior of subatomic matter. It behaves both like particles and both like waves. Now, this is not a small thing because they're opposites. A particle is an entity confined to a very small region, a very small volume. A wave is spread out over a large region of space. So the two are not the same. How can light be both? A wave, which means a field of energy, and also a particle, which is a discrete, a self-contained entity. This remains one of the big mysteries of our time. But it's been proven that despite the inherent paradox, light is both particles and waves. Okay, this is light. What's the origin of light? Torah, Oir. Torah is the source of light. Comes this Yerushalmi and Rish Lakish says, I have been struggling with something, and the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua taught me something beautiful. What did he teach me? He taught me, you want to understand Torah? It's a Tarshish. It's a Yam Rabbah. Between one wave and another wave, what do you have? You have another wave. It's a gal cotton, but it's all a wave. Don't see Torah as particles. You have to see Torah as waves. So in the Aseres HaDibros, what do you have between one dibur and another dibur? You just have waves, not particles. So you have all the dikdukim, you have all the oisius, but it's a wave. From here you learn, he says, that the Yerushalmi believes that in the first luchas, the whole Torah was one Metzias, just like the Galim, the waves are one entity, one Metzias. And therefore, as a result of this, in the first luchas, the Torah was seen as a wave, not as particles. It's an ocean, many, many waves, but they create one body of water. All the diktukim of Torah, all the details of Torah are seen as one part and parcel of the larger wave. If this is the case, come now back to the medrash we discussed in the beginning. Moshe was upset by the first luchas when he broke them, and Hashem said, don't be upset because the second luchas will have halacha, medrash, agada, and the first luchas not. What are you going to do with the whole Torah? Now we understand the first luchas, of course it had everything. But by the first luchas, there wasn't halachas, medrashas, agadas. By the first luchas, what was experienced? What was experienced was dibur echad. One klal. In the klal, they saw all the pratim. In the essence, they saw ultimately all the details. And in all the details, they saw it as a reflection of the essence. It wasn't divisible. This is all the first luchas. What happens afterwards? The Jews come to Aaron and say, Asei lanu elikim ashel yelchu lefanenu. What the Egel HaZahav accomplished was the sin of the golden calf is they extricated themselves from this unifying space. In fact, it's the meaning of the word Aveira. Aveira, we say, is sin, but that's not the real translation of Aveira. What does Aveira mean? Aveira mean, like in Hilchas Shabbos, Hamayvir merishus l'rishus, you transfer. Where you're transferring from? Before the Aveira, everything is one, Rishus HaYachid. The Aveira, you transfer yourself and your vision from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. Now you're not anymore in one domain. Now you're in a public domain. There's billions of people. There's billions of items, of entities. Everything is on its own. Even you are on your own, separate from your own source, separate from your oneness, separate from Hashem Echad. There's no anymore oneness. It's a whole different reality. So what happens? What happens is the luchas break. What happens when you break something? One entity splinters into many details. You have everything, but it's broken. You have a vessel, it was there, now it breaks. You could collect all the pieces. But when you collect all the pieces, you may have all the pieces. But what do you have? You have nothing more than a sum of the parts. Even if you get all the pieces, what do you have? You have many pieces coming together. You don't have any more the oneness. Torah assumed a new identity now. The broken luchas was not just an impulsive response, let me break it. It represented the new dimension of Torah now. Now what we have is a piece, fragments. And even if I could gather all the fragments, my klal is basically a sum of the parts. Where before, my parts were only a reflection of the whole. Even if I can get it all, sometimes all I have is many pieces together. So I know more than somebody else, but I still did not necessarily get from tashma to tachazi, from hearing to seeing. I may know everything, but I really know very little because I don't have that underlying essence, the essential energy. I may know more than many others. I have more pieces, but I still have pieces. I don't have that unifying source to be able to sense the Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Torah, the oneness of Hashem, the oneness of the world, the oneness of the Jewish people. Two things happen. First of all, from the perspective of Luchas Rishonos, if you break one mitzvah, you broke everything. The moment the Jews worshipped Avodah Zarah, everything was lost. The moment they broke one mitzvah, everything breaks because it's not made up of details. It's made up of a klal. You lose one part, you lost it because each part is the it. And the it includes it all. So you lost it all. On the other hand, you still have it, but now you have to start a whole new search, a search for the details. Moshe broke the luchas not to punish or destroy the Jewish people, to save the Jewish people. Now he understood Judaism is going to go into a new phase. Till that point, Judaism was experienced as a holistic picture. From that point, Judaism will be experienced as a world of pratim. In the beginning, we went from seeing to hearing, and now we have to go from hearing to seeing. We start with details, and then you have to bring back the details and hopefully recreate your picture. So you have klal and prat, and then you have prat and klal. It's two different phases. And you have klal, prat, and klal. To be able to go from klal to prat, and then go from prat to klal. And that has a tragedy, but also a beauty. Because there's an advantage in the second, in the sense that you really work through. You work through the details. It's almost like two minds. Sometimes you have a student who grasps everything right away. Sometimes you have somebody who doesn't grasp anything right away. And as a teacher for many years, that second student who never grasps, but doesn't stop asking questions. So in the beginning, you sometimes get a little irritated. But at the end, when you work it through with them, you understand it better, and they understand it much better than the first one. Because when you grasp everything initially, there's a beauty to it. You got it. But when you really have to work it through detail by detail by detail, you got to go through what's called boirer. You have to select the pebbles, the psoilos out of the oichel, and really work it through. It's like the advantage of tshuva. You have to work through your dirt and your mess, and then reach from the pratim, the klal. It's a whole new experience. Now I ask you a question. Comes the Rakachava and he says, where did I get this chiddush? He says, it says clearly in the Medrash, in his Medrash. Take a look in the next source. Shir HaShirim Rabbi Perik Hey. That same Perik where it discusses the Tarshish. Says the Medrash, the Eitz Yosef's version. Luchas Rishonis Nechtzevu Migal Gal Chama. The first luchas were Nechtzevu, were mined, excavated, honed, chiseled from, yun. From the sun. What about the second luchas? Rashi Kisisa Lamadalad, Psalacha, Hereyu Machzev Sampirinin Metoich Aholoi. The first luchas are made from the sun, are carved out from the sun. The second, Moshe finds a sapphire stone in his tent. Okay, how much significance do we attribute to these statements? Okay, the first luchas he made from the sun. What that means, I don't know. He took a piece of the sun. What? So the Mefarshim say they shined like the sun. Okay? The Rekachava says, no, this is a halachic definition. Where's the halachic definition? So by him, it's clear. It's a pasuk in Parshas Emor. Where is it a pasuk in Parshas Emor? Just look at these comparisons that he makes. Take a look. Nefesh asher tiga boy v'tama da erev lo yoichel min hakotshim ki im rachatz b'sarei b'mayim. A kohen who touches impurity becomes tameh. He cannot eat the sacred offerings till he goes to the mikveh. He washes his flesh in water. Uba shemesh v'toher. The sun sets. The kohen becomes pure. V'achar yoichel min hakotshim ki lachmayu. And then he can eat from the karbonis. Chazal say it means truma because it's his bread. So if a kohen, let's say, touches one of the shratzim, one of the sources of impurity, right? Or he emits seed, whatever the source of impurity, he goes to the mikveh. Everything is good, but you can't eat yet the holy food of truma. You have to wait. Ba shemesh, what's called harev shemesh. The sun has to set. Night has to come, and then you eat. This is the opening of the first Mishnah in Shas. Me'ema sakar neshma ba'arvis mishah sha'koyanim nechnasim lechel b'trumasim. From the time that the koyanim come in to eat truma, which is when? Nightfall. Uba Shemesh v'Torah. Comes this Sifra, Torah's Koyanim Parshas Emor. Zok the Sifra, it says, Rachatz b'sarei b'mayim. He should wash his flesh in water. What does that mean? So you take a shower, you go to a pool of water, and you wash your flesh with water. Yochel yehi marchitz ever. Perhaps you might think the Kohen could bathe, can wash every limb, one limb, and then another limb, and another limb. It says, wash your flesh in water. Talmud loymar ba hashemesh v'toher. That's why the pasuk says, when the sun sets, he'll become pure. So we learn it all what? It's a time of the day. The Torah's Kohanim says it's not only a time of the day, it's a description of the way to go to the mikveh. V'rachatz b'sorei b'mayim u'ba hashemesh v'tor. Ma bias shimshoi kuloi ka'achas. Av b'mayim kuloi ka'achas. Just like the sun goes down, there's a moment of kuloi ka'achas. The entire sun is gone from the horizon, what we call nightfall. The entire sun, the entire ball of the sun is gone. That's how you have to wash your flesh in water. Completely submerged. Not part of the sun you could see, part of the sun you don't see. Bias shemesh kulei kiachas. The sun is one ball and there's a point where it's gone. In the water, yes, you can go down slowly. I don't mind if you go down slowly, just like the sun descends. It takes some time. But at some point, the sun is out. Some point, I can't see you. I should not see you anymore. You should be under the water. Says the Rakachava. This is the pshat in the Medrash. The first luchas came from Galgal Chama. What's the definition of Galgal Chama? Kulei ka'achas. It's one ball, it's a sun. And that's the mikveh. You go completely into the water, the sun sets, completely one. That's the luchas. The second luchas come from Moshe's tent. What's a tent? This is a tent. Look at it. You have a stender, you have a mic, you have a person, you have another person, you have a video camera, you have food, you have a bagel, you have one person dreaming, one person sleeping, one person texting, one person listening, one person smiling, one person wondering when he's going to finish. It's not kulei kiyachas. Everybody does their own thing. It's a tent. What's an oil? An oil is a murkav. It's a composite of many different elements. Chama is one entity. The first luchas come from Galgal Chama. It's one. The second luchas come from Moshe's tent. It's a reflection of the halachic definition between the two. Now, let's see this in the words of the Tzofnas Paneach. And you'll see two things. First of all, how he writes. Second of all, how cryptic and concise and what you have to figure out. And then we'll finally come back to the difference between the mountain. You remember what I started with, or you forgot? The mountain of the first luchas, the mountain of the second luchas. Tzofnas Paneach Ma'adurit Tinyana Daf Peyalef. These are his words. This was the difference between the first and second tablets. By the first luchas, the whole Torah was begeder one nekuda. One seminal point. Clear in your Yerushalmi, Shkalim, and Saita. You know what Yerushalmi, Mimolayim Betarshish. It's like the sea with many waves, but between one wave and another wave is another wave. In other words, it's indivisible. It's not like this wave stops here and now there's a new wave. It's indivisible. You see here that it's one nekuda. The whole Torah is one inyan. You know the argument in Tosefta. Again, if kol Torah inyan echad or not. Another difference is if you're a mumar, if you're prone to violate one mitzvah, if that means that we cannot trust you in the rest of Torah. Depends on this question if the Torah is one entity or it's a divisible entity. You can embrace one and reject another one. This is what the Rakachava says. Next piece. Ma'adura tinyana dafnun tes. Ma shemesh kuloi ka'achas. Ritzoynoi loymar. The svirele, the shemesh hi nekuda achas. You can ask, what does the Teres Kayana mean? When the sun sets, you become pure. Yeah? What does it mean that the sun sets, you become pure? It means, he says, that the whole sun sets. It cannot be divisible. Why? He says, because what he's explaining to you is that the shemesh is a nakuda achas. So therefore, if part of the sun you could see, part of the sun you can't see, you can't say bo hashemesh. Why not? Maybe yeah. Part of the sun, because there's no part. Of course, there's many parts of the sun. The sun is huge, but it means the way halacha experiences and relates to the sun It's the sun. It's an indivisible entity. It's the wave, it's not the particle. And it's light. And therefore, Uba Hashemesh means the whole sun. So mikveh means the whole body, just like the shemesh. Ubedrush ha'arachti bazeh begeder hach machloikes b'toiseftes Sanhedrin Perek Zayin im kol ha'Torah inyan echad. Now just take a look at the Rakatshava himself. There's a machloikes in Sanhedrin Toisefta Perek Zayin. He'll forgive me if I say sa'afar vorfene Toisefta. That very few people besides the Rakatshava would ever even come across, right? I should say Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky was a genius. He wrote a sefer, right? Chazon Yecheskel. He has his commentary on Tosefta. He was a big expert on Tosefta. So they say that somebody once asked him a question, and he said, I have a question on some, how do you say farvorfene? Some castaway Tosefta. So Rabbi Cheskel said, he says, du bist verworfen. The Tosefta is nicht verworfen, the Tosefta. You're maybe castaway. Tosefta is exactly where it has to be, right? But he has a Tosefta here, so he finds the parallel between a Torah's koyanim in the laws of mikveh about the sun with a medrash in Shir Hashirim about the luchas to explain the machlokes in Sanhedrin about the Torah. Now, he didn't struggle with this. He saw it. He saw it. When he saw that the luchas came from the sun, he saw immediately. What do we mean the sun? There's a medrash that tells us what the sun is. It's indivisible. That's why the Tosefta says, Chachamim say, it's one inyan, it's one Torah. So, this is literally in every sugya. He does this in every sugya in Kol HaTorah Kula. In Nigla he does this. So now come to the next step. Tzofnas paneich nosai. V'chei nafke minne ben luchas harishaynes luchas shniyas. Luchas harishaynes hava Torah mitzias achas u'batel echad batel chas v'shalom hakoil l'kach nishberu. In the luchas harishaynes Torah is one mitzias, so if one thing gets nullified, the whole thing gets nullified. That's why it breaks. It breaks because you can't break off a piece. It all breaks. It all decomposes. Now, if so, we can understand the difference of how the mountain is described in Kisisa and how the mountain is described in Yisro. Tzofnas paneich haftorah v'eschana. Haluchas harishonis hava Torah mitzias achas u'batel echad batel hakol chas v'shalom l'kach nishberu. By the first luchas, the Torah is one mitzias, one entity. You nullify one, you nullify everything, and therefore they broke. Ulekach hahar hava etzem echad. So the mountain was considered one etzem, one entity, one core entity, hanegeya me'achoirav. And therefore, even if you touch it from the back, you're still touching the same holy mountain. Aval ein loy avir ki loy hava keli. But there's no din of atmosphere, of ear, of avir, because it's not a definition of a vessel. Mashenkin luchas shniyas, by the second luchas, hava kol ha-Torah mitztarefes. Here, the whole Torah is considered something that's mitztaref. It's combined. Particles that combine. Ubegeder kli. It's all in the definition. It can be defined as particles in a vessel. V'lo niskachu achareha. The back of the vessel is not sacred. Ach mikol makom yesh lo kedushas avir. But it has the kedusha of avir. Now we have to figure this out. You understand what the Rakatshava is saying? He's saying the difference between the luchas in the first Matan Torah and the second luchas redefine the difference in the mountain. By the first luchas, the first Matan Torah, where the Torah is considered one mitzias, the whole Torah is one etzem like the sun, the mountain, which is the receptacle of Torah, has that same definition. It's like an etzem echad, it's one, so to speak, indivisible entity, halachically speaking. So therefore Hashem says, whoever touches it, even negeya bikotseyu, you go to the far edge, me'achoyr, if you go to the back, it is sacred and it is dangerous. But then you have in halacha, in a different element, in the laws of purity and impurity. We have, for example, the halacha of a klei cheres, an earthenware vessel. What's the halacha when it comes to an earthenware vessel? Huh? Metame? No, when it comes to Tumah. If Tumah touches the back, the bottom, the outside of the keli, nothing happens. It's pure. A kohen could eat karbonis in the keli, no problem. There's one way it becomes tamei. How? Me'aviroi, it's called. Ein klei cheres metame ela me'aviroi. The atmosphere. For example, you take a sheretz, right? You take a dead weasel, and you put it in. You touch it to the keli, no problem. You put it, you hang it inside the keli, it doesn't touch it. The whole klei cheres becomes tamei. And as you know, you can't be it metame. You can't be metame. What do you have to do? You have to break it. Shvirasan zeo takanos. What's the reason for this? So actually, there's a beautiful insight from the Kotzker Rebbe about this in Lumdus. He says as follows: every keli has its own value. Take a keli of gold, keli of silver, klei matches, metal. It has value. It's precious. Because it's precious, a davar chashav is mekabel tumah. Tumah and tara is something that's precious. The more a person uses it, the more it's prominent, the more distinguished, it's always more mekabel tumah. A klei zahav, a klei matches, it has its own value. You touch it, it becomes tamei. It says a klei cheres is one of the cheapest items in the world because it's earth. What do? It's mamish, it's earth. Right? That's what it is. It's earth. You take earth, mud, sometimes you put in a little straw, you bake it, right? It becomes hard. That's a klei cheres. So it's cheap. It's priceless. The keli itself is garnished with garnish that's worthless. But what is its value? Its value is what it holds, what you put into it. Where do you put things into it? Into the atmosphere, into the ear. So he says, when you touch the keli from the outside, you're touching something that doesn't have value. It's not makabel tumah. But it does have value. What's its value? That which it holds, that which it carries inside of itself, that which it represents inside. And he says this about a person. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam ofer min ha'adama. Every person is an earthenware vessel. Sometimes if you start looking at yourself, you say, oy vavoy, adam yisoidim yafer v'soifil afer, chbenashte garnished, I'm worthless. But when you look at that which you represent, that which you carry inside of you, that which you have inside of you, that which you can accomplish through your presence, that which you carry, that which you represent, a person is priceless. So klei cheres is a keli. On its own, it's just there to hold other things. You could throw in pebbles, you could put money, right? You could put silver, in a klei cheres you could put food, you could put whatever you put. A lot of different things. It's mitzaref a lot of things. It on its own is not makabel tumah. He says that's the difference between the mountain the first time, the mountain the second time. The mountain the first time had a gather of etzem. The mountain itself is considered a sacred, indivisible entity, just like the first luchas, just like the first Torah. And therefore, any part of the mountain that you touch, negeya bekatseyu, it has the kedusha. He says the second luchas, the whole reality changed in the luchas. So the reality changed in the world. So the reality changed in the mountain also. Now the mountain is begether of klei cheres. It's earth, it's mountain, and it's a keli. Now the Torah essentially is a keli. What is Shas today? Shas is a bookcase. It's a bookcase that has in it many Mishnahs, many Gemaras, many Rashis, many Tosfos. By the first luchas, what was Shas? Shas wasn't a vessel that had in it many Mishnahs, many Masechtas. Shas it was one. It was an indivisible entity. Either with the same Mishnahs and Gemaras, but you saw it all as brush strokes, as rays of one sun. It's one shemesh. It's one entity. Now what do we have? Now Torah is begeder mitztarefes. What does it mean mitztarefes? I have a Torah. What's Torah? I have a Shulchan Aruch, I have a Mishnayos, I have a Gemara, I have this Sefer, I have that Sefer. And the Sefer has many pages and many details. I went through half, you went through the whole, you went through a quarter, you're working on it. It's a keli that has in it millions, billions, trillions, infinite details. But what? Particles. So Har Sinai is that keli. Har Sinai is that vessel that has within it the Aseres HaDibros that are different. That's why there's halacha, there's medrash, there's haggadah. Moshe was aggravated. Hashem says, don't be aggravated. The first time you only had the Aseres HaDibros. Of course he had the whole Torah. But there it wasn't distinguished in details. Now you're going to have Halacha, Medrash, and Agoda. And that has an advantage of its own. It has, of course, a disadvantage of its own. It's a different Seder Avodah. It's called Avodas HaBirurim. You got to do Birur. So therefore, by the second Kisisa, he doesn't say if you touch the mountain, it's a problem. You could touch the mountain, touch the Klei Cheres. Just like in Tum, it's also in Tara. The mountain is good. What does it say? Gamatzoin v'habakar ariru el mul aharahu. If you come in the space of the mountain, if you come in the environment of the mountain, if you come into the ear space of the mountain, that is the issue. Because now, what am I carrying? Now I'm carrying the luchas shniyas that are different. So the har is like a keli that's mitzara of the details. The keli itself you can touch. But the ear space of the keli, that's where the kedusha is. In the first one, what am I carrying? I'm carrying an indivisible core. And the mountain also therefore becomes indivisible. So therefore there it says, El mula harahu bin kisisa. And in Yisro it says, Negeya bekatseya. And he finishes, he says, V'emirtza Hashem, la asid lavai. In the future, yiyu shnei amailas. Torah will have both milas. As we said before, klal, prat, uklal. There's klal and prat. There's klal and prat. There's prat and klal. Then there's klal, prat, and then you come to another klal. V'zeh omar nachamu nachamu. That's why it says nachamu nachamu. Why twice nachamu? He says one is a nechama for the luchas rishonis. One is a nechama for the luchas shniyas. That the Jews people will be able to experience all the pratim. They'll also be able to experience the klal, the oneness that's expressed in all of the details. Have a wonderful week. Yeah.
I broke the Enechem part. You can't see it.
Sehr gut. You hear? That's what es sagt. Vashabrim leinechem. So the Mefarshim say, L'maynaf gemini leinechem. I broke them. If it wasn't before your eyes. It says, Vashabrim leinechem. I broke the ability for you to see. The Einechem, the ability to see Torah, you don't have anymore. Now it's Shmiya.
La'enei kol Yisrael.
La'enei kol Yisrael.
Right after that, it says Shema Yisrael.
These two Mayas is just the opposite.
That's a good question. He's saying Reb Meir in Eruvin says that it's one Metzias, and the Tosefti argues with the Chachamim. That's one question. Another question is, usually they don't paskin like Reb Meir, especially Keneged the Chachamim, and here they do paskin like Reb Meir. You understand? That's a second problem, that it's a big pella. And he brings them both one after the other. And that's why by mid is upgelegt, even though I don't have proof for it, but I have to research, that it could be that there was a different gerson Tosefta Sanhedrin. Because Rekachava brings both together, so that means he didn't see a contradiction. So and I see the halach is like Reb Meir, which is strange. So it could be it's the opposite, but I don't know. I have to look, because it's very strange. It's very strange. No, very good. Freg's good. The same question is also about Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Depends how you touch it. Because I think that's what he says, but I don't know. It's also, yeah.
And
That's the point.
I never
In other words, when the whole Torah is one, you break one, you lost it all. The concept of Moshe breaking the luchas was inventing a new derech. The derech is that you lost a lot, and you go into the details. You go into the details, and then from the details you come back to the core. That's what tshuva is.
but I understood when
You have to
know-
find God in the
when you
broken
know
pieces.
That it's either or.
From that perspective, in other words, in that oneness, in that great state of oneness, it's indivisible. If I betray you, this was Reb Meir's Chiddush. Reb Meir saw the oneness even afterwards. The Gemara, the Medrash says that in the Sefer Torah of Reb Meir, it didn't say kosnus or with an ayin. It said kosnus or with an aleph. Or with an ayin is skin, fur, leather. Or with an aleph is light. So when Adam and Chava put on clothes, he doesn't see kosnes ur with an ayin. He sees kosnes ur with an aleph. In other words, ur covers up. Ur with an aleph is light. So Reb Meir never sees the details as eclipsing. He sees them as reflecting. That's by Reb Meir. He didn't see a cover-up. It says he could learn from Elisha ben Avuya. He learned from Elisha ben Avuya. The Gemara says how? Toichai achal, klipasai zarak. We had a shir a few months ago. He ate the inside and he threw out the klipa. He didn't see klipa, Reb Meir. He always saw the light. Ivir taka, when you betray, you can't betray because you're just one. There's no amputation, it's just one entity. It's essential. That's where the Jews were. When they did betray, Moshe said, now we need a new derech. What's the new derech? The new derech is, you live a life of details. And you build that. And we have to be able to find God in the broken fragments, in the broken pratim. And then from the pratim, you can come back to that klal. And that's what tshuva really means. Tshuva means that part of me is broken, but part of me is still whole. That's what tshuva is. It's not or nothing. It's not either. But we have to recognize that it's a descent, it's a yerida, it's a compromise of the original state.
Well, I never understood with the ego, like out of magic, out of nowhere, it just came. Only Hashem could do that.
Okay, that's a good question. That's for another shir.
And is Shamar and Zachar, is there a way to tie in?
Of course. Zachar and Shamar. Zachar is essay, Shamar is loisasa. Zachar is what you do for Shabbos, Shamar is what you don't do. Right?
How does that tie in?
B'dibur echad. It's really one. It's completely one, Zachar and Shamar.
The first set of because it says Zachar, so does that tie in?
The second one also. Veschanan. Veschanan is not the second luchas. Veschanan is just Moshe repeating the story again. Veschanan is not the second luchas. Veschanan is just repeating the story again. You understand?
Zohar maybe is the first one, is when it was given. So that's
There's a beautiful story. The Balatanya, the Alter Rebbe had a chassid. And the chassid, he was a simple man, but a very God-fearing man, and he would daven every day for a very, very long time. With tremendous, tremendous kavanah. And they once asked him, what do you think about during davening? Because he didn't have, he wasn't considered a man of great intellectual stature. Like, what do you think about so much? So he said, I don't know, but I once heard from my Rebbe, from the Balatanya of Art. He said, Zochar v'shamar b'dibur echad. So the Balatanya touched. In jeden Zach, b'dibur, in jede Zach, darf man gedenken und hitten dem echad. In everything, you have to remember and hold on, preserve the echad of it, the oneness of it. In every davar, in everything in life, hold on to the echad. He said, umedem davenech. 40 years later, he's davening with this. So that's the vart. There's the echad and everything. You wanted to ask?
Yeah, but there's some amarot that the Rabbi said.
Lihipara min arishayim.
Yeah,
So why does it say first lihipara min arishayim and then start with the positive and then with the negative? The answer is, it doesn't say lahanish as harishayim. It says lihipara min harishayim. It should have said to punish the Rishayim. Lihipara doesn't mean to punish. Lihipara means to get paid back. To get paid back. Okay? Like priyat chov, like paying a debt. They owe a debt. What's the debt? They destroy the world. They destroy the world. Shenivra b'asara mamoris, right? In order for them to pay back the debt, they can't go to the Asarim Amaris because they destroyed it. They have to go to the one, to the Maimer Echad. They have to go back to the Echad.
The Avera, they go to the other side. Avera, it's from like
Right.
Me'ever.
Me'ever, yeah. Yeah. They destroyed the Asarim Amaris, they have to go back to the source. And then you have the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik didn't destroy, the Tzaddik preserves the Asarim Amaris. He maintains the details, right? The Baal Tshuva got to go back to the one, to the source. Tafasta? L'chen katuv li'ipara min harishayim. L'chaim u'levracha. Thank you. Hatzlacha, hatzlacha.